Hello, everyone, and welcome to Investing by the Books, a podcast by Redeye. I'm your host, Eddie Palmgren, and with me here in the studio is my friend and colleague, Niklas. How are you?
All good. And with the market at low levels and small and micro caps even lower, I'm busy researching new ideas. I think this is the times that long-term investors really live for, it's a good time.
I think today's guests are very fitting in that sense. We have the pleasure of speaking with Shu Hattori, our first Japanese native on the show. And Shu has more than 15 years of experience in management consulting, turnarounds, and venture-backed startups, with employers including McKinsey in Tokyo and Shanghai, Groupon in Asia, and Alix Partners. And what Shu is doing now is building Japan's first serial acquirer, Pinecone Assets, together with Andrew Chou, who will also join us in this episode. So, Niklas, which book will we speak about?
So on top of his other merits, Shu is also an internationally published author. The name of his book is The McKinsey Edge: Success Principles from the World's Most Powerful Consulting Firm. So Eddie, why is this book of interest for us as investors?
As the subtitles indicates, McKinsey is one of, if not the most powerful consulting firm in the world, and it has been so for a long time. So while we as investors, we might not agree with everything they do, and it's a special world being a consultant in usually big organizations, there is tons of knowledge in firms like McKinsey on how leaders and organizations can think to outperform their competition. And what I also like about the book is that Shu is a really organized person, and he provides a lot of advice on how to improve our processes to get better results, which is really useful as an investor. What are your thoughts about the McKinsey Edge?
I think it's an interesting book with lessons on how to improve yourself, how to improve groups, and also productivity hacks. And that's also more or less the structure of the book. Shu, have that overall structure with, I think he begins with lessons on how to improve yourself and list a few principles. And then he goes on with how to improve groups and a few principles and then productivity hacks. I really like the section of the book discussing the importance of staying focused on long-term improvements. That really resonates with me because it's the way I think about investing. The best companies, in my view, prioritize the long term over the short term, and I think Shu brings up a few points on long-termism which investors can match companies' wordings with.
The McKinsey Edge was first published by McGraw-Hill in 2016, and we are delighted to have its author and his business partner on the show today. Here comes our conversation with Shu Hattori and Andrew Chou. Hello, Shu and Andrew, and welcome to Investing by the Books podcast.
Glad to be here. Very much excited.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
We met in Stockholm earlier this year, and it's great to now have you on with us in the show. So where are you this time?
So right now I am in Nihonbashi, which is in the heart of Tokyo, right behind the sort of Tokyo Stock Exchange. So our building is really behind this monumental exchange. And it's actually where the founder of the Japanese banking system, Shibusawa Eiichi, used to live.
Wonderful. And how about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm right next to Shu.
Perfect. And for our listeners to get to know you, if we start with you, Shu, what led you into the world of business and entrepreneurship and investing?
Yeah, so for me, my grandfather was an entrepreneur in Shizuoka, which is a prefecture west of Tokyo, known for its green tea. And he operated like a car dealership, an auto dealership, primarily for Suzuki cars. And he was also a mechanic at the same time. This was like after the World War II, and there was nothing. It's barren land, and he actually started importing foreign cars, which was the sort of the fad at the time. So he was really ahead of his time. And I think for me, I've always like had it in me to do something exciting and meaningful for society. So those two things need to be pretty much integrated. And I think right now that those two opportunities sort of collided with the founding of these succession issues and business succession issues that we find in Japan right now, and this like perpetual autonomous serial acquire model that we've witnessed, and that sort of combination really led to this opportunity right here.
We will speak a bit more about that later on in the conversation. Looking forward to that. But first, Andrew, how has your journey been?
Yeah, so look, I'd like to say that I've kind of done all the things that Shu hasn't done, professionally speaking, and vice versa. So I come from a investing slash sort of corporate finance kind of background. So I was an engineer by training. I did my stint in investment banking, moved on to the buy side. I did 5 years in private equity investing, mostly in the micro cap space. And then, most recently, sort of my role was basically as, in a long short equity fund. And my focus there was basically investing in Japanese companies and basically trying to find sort of those great high quality Japanese companies. And in between all of that, I actually bought a small sanitary hygiene business, which I ran, which I was the owner operator of. And that sort of, I guess, made me really sort of appreciate, number one, the sort of opportunities that are in this SME space. And also, being a hands-on operator, it gets you to really appreciate certain things about sort of business, rather than just being an investor looking from outside in. So yeah, so that was really fun for me. Um, and so in terms of where sort of I cross paths with Shu, well, look, as you can tell, our backgrounds are sort of fairly different. So we didn't meet at work or at school, but look, we met sort of later in life. We met socially, and it was one of those things where we kind of just sort of clicked, and sort of what sort of really got the conversation or got the sort of friendship going was really sort of our shared interest in business and in investing. Um, and I guess what's really sort of interesting there was that basically what sort of provided the connective tissue in terms of our ongoing conversations was actually books. So we're both sort of avid readers, and I know in your website there's a book list of about 20 books of the best investing books, and we probably have read maybe 15 of them at least, like where we both have commonly read those books. And so I think it's quite apt that we're on this podcast, because I mean, I guess sort of that's similar to your modus operandi. You're basically connecting a community of people that enjoy business and enjoy investing through books. So yeah, so look forward to a fun conversation.
Thanks for that great introduction. And I mean, talking about books, for the first part of this episode, we will focus on Shu's book, The McKinsey Edge, and then go in a bit more into what you're doing at Pinecone. So, Shu, how did your book come about?
Yeah, so I personally have passion and interest in writing to begin with. And actually, my career started off as a financial journalist. And it was a very short stint before I left for Taiwan and then subsequently China. But it was like my passion never died down. And for this particular book, The McKinsey Edge, to be honest, it was sort of accidental because of the rigor in McKinsey, I always had to be taking a lot of notes. And these notes were important for me as I really tried to solve through the daily grind and the hardships in our projects. And then every time I would get advice from seniors, I would put them into a framework, into nice charts and really clean them up so that I can use them for my next projects. And then I would actually be better, so I could perform better. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but McKinsey has this sort of up or out policy where every 6 months you are assessed. And if your performance review doesn't go as planned or on par or called tracking, you do have to have a very serious discussion with your seniors, right? So it was more of that. And then I started realizing that these sort of how-to practical intelligence tips was actually very, very, very important to my success and also to my colleagues' successes. And actually, then I started to talk and gather these nuggets from the other managers and other partners who were in the firm that I respected. And they also had these amazing tips, these are leadership tips to get to the next level. And so that's really how it happened. And then I started to interview more in depth and gathering more and more of these leadership tips. And then I really went on from there.
I think it was really, really helpful to have that, practical aspect of the book, that you really, learned all these lessons from working. I think it's similar to, we had an episode with Daniel Chang from Technion, and his book about investing is also really about his lesson from doing this practically. And I think that's, take this to a different level. And your book largely consists of 47 principles. Why did you choose to have that structure?
So yeah, that part's quite simple. I started to gain, so I started collecting these principles, and the more and more I gained, so past 40, 50, I actually went up to all the way to like 70. The principles were not as novel or original anymore, and it started to kind of merge at a golden sort of number of 45 to 50, where it really had that spike. And then I just knew from the McKinsey MISI kind of framework, it was a bottom-up MISI, but you could get to that number, and it was just that really covered everything from individuals to growing with others to productivity, process, and then what are the really hard things that we can't really think about intuitively. And that's where it was 47.
And the book is written from a consultant's perspective, but we read it from an investor's perspective, and there are many insights that are relevant for investors, I think. And one example is a McKinsey colleague that you had at the time who was named Dave, and he was doing a lot of market research, and that's something we also do as investors and analysts and so on. And he would always ask the question, when was the last time I ... did something? So can you tell us a bit more about this and how you used it?
Yeah, thank you. So this is very specific questions, and it shows how much deep dive analysis you've done in the book. So I'm flattered. So Dave was a partner at the time, and he was in the aerospace and automotive industry. And for content's sake, this particular principle was about commitment plan. And to have a commitment plan allows you to reach your goals, and you tend to achieve them through this principle. And I think, for example, right? So if you're trying to get very good at forecasting future trends in a certain industry, automotive or aerospace, like Dave was, realize that it's not just enough to be attending seminars or panels or info discussions or even watching YouTube, right? And instead, it is a lot more important to test yourself through real engagement questions. So engaging yourself with what you know and the real outside world. And this question, when was the last time for example, right? When was the last time I spoke to someone outside my immediate circle? Or when was the last time I looked at a tangential or peripheral technology? Or when was the last time, if you have a department like the R&D department, did I go down there to talk to them real time, right? So this when was the last time actually puts you in a very acute sort of time-centric relevancy mode. And that is what is very important, I believe, for consultants as well, but more so for investors, because relevancy is the most important thing when you think about future trends and how that's going to pan out. So I believe that when you do look into these, right, when was the last time it really hits home. And the last point is about the ease of answering this question. So when you are able to check this off, when was the last time I talked to this expert? And it's like, oh, yesterday, I know Mike, kind of thing. Then it means you really know the subject well.
Yeah, I make the connection to checklists that we use as investors, and I guess you could build a checklist out of this and have many situations where you would ask yourself, when was the last time I did X, Y, Z? And maybe there are like other situations where you can use this. Do you have any such examples?
I mean, when you're talking about governing your own companies, I think it's important to ask that question. when was the last time I went down to the factory or to talk to the customers? And even if you are not the operator and you're an investor, when was the last time I went on talk to the customers of the investment company that I'm investing in, right? Because that goes a whole 9 yards. But that would really give you a lot of confidence.
And another method that you practiced at McKinsey was to ask second-order questions, which I think also investors benefit a lot from doing. And maybe you can explain a bit what is a second-order question.
Yeah, great question. Indeed, it's just like a hard one to grasp at first. So second-order questions, for those unfamiliar, is a question that you have to dig deeper and becomes extremely valuable when you have to make a decision. And it arises actually from the first, or what we call the first order question, where we ask the 5 whys. And the 5 whys is you keep asking why, so that you seemingly get to the bottom of that issue. And it's actually very helpful to get to the bottom of that issue. But in the mid of my tenure, or most consultants arrive at this conclusion, is that is actually not enough to just ask the 5 whys, which turns into so what implications. It's even more important to ask the next level, which is the second order questions. And that is what the second order question ultimately means. And I think we can start with this sort of understanding this why level, but why should we raise prices? Because the competitor is raising prices, or why is the competitor raising prices? Because of rising inventory costs or logistics costs. Why is the logistics cost rising? Is because of the supplier or something like that. And you get to the bottom of this, and then you realize, so you can make a decision. But even after you make the decision, it's not enough. It's almost like you have to go beyond that and say, you assume that the prices were raised. Then what happens to the industry dynamics, the competitors, the long-term profitability impact? And it really encourages you to think about the deeper consequences in mind. And this is really the key point for investors, I think. So if this concern that you have indeed materialized, right, would they be comfortable with that outcome? And would that give them enough margin of safety? And that's something positive or negative impact for the long run. These kind of things ultimately will become your answer when you ask this second order of questions.
I think you summarize a lot of the operating system that people such as Buffett has. I think when people ask him, what are you doing every day? And he says reading and thinking. And I think that's what you mentioned here is a lot of the things that he thinks about.
That's too much of a flattery. But yes, I think thinking sets leaders apart. That is the core.
And you also share many ideas in the book on how to improve our processes. I mean, for example, many investors have probably never thought about the importance of note-taking. And myself, when I read this, I was a bit, I mean, in my early years as I mean working at a bank, when there were like presentations, I always took notes meticulously, and that was something I learned from university. But now, more or less, I just take a few notes every time. And I really got something out of the book on this. I mean, you didn't know as well before McKinsey, it seemed, but you learned a lot from other peers in McKinsey. So what are your lessons from there and elsewhere on this topic?
So on the note-taking topic, is a spectacular question. So first off, let me hold your thought about taking fewer notes. I'll get to that. But in general, I believe note-taking is the holy grail for consultants and investors and every aspiring businessman out there. And the question now becomes, what is it about note-taking tactically you should think about, including the output and the process? And I can offer you 3 nuggets to think. One is really focus on the structure of your notes. And you start off with a long form of unstructured notes, and that is very normal. And you let that be. So you let your mind carry your way through. And a lot of people try to structure it as they write the notes. It's actually not the right sort of approach. It's actually, you just write out these long form notes, and then you use your inner theme later to structure this. And that's what is extremely important, because then you can apply the risk reward or opportunity, threats, people, process, business, sort of what you also do on your podcast as well. And that requires a lot of thinking. So that doesn't happen in sort of phase one. And the next thing is, the next level up is what you just mentioned, is as you grow, you take fewer notes. And you're able to take fewer notes because with few words, you're able to unlock all of that wisdom underneath them. And it's training your mind to be able to do that. And the better you get, the deeper, or the thinking part becomes much more refined. So that's sort of the second phase. And the third one is, this is the hardest, although sounds very intuitive, is reviewing your notes. So a lot of us take these notes and then that's it, and we forget about it. We don't go back, we don't review them, and we just feel very satisfied and fulfilled that we have a book and shelf full of all these notes, and that's where a lot of the wisdom is lost. And I take this upon myself. I actually have these notes in different colors now, that where I just flip through them, and just flipping through them really takes you really down that path, that random walk sort of path, and it's really good.
And I mean, you're really the master in this aspect. I mean, this is really the start of the book, right? I mean, you started to write down the lessons that you got from McKinsey, and then it became a book. So you took it to the next level. And I mean, you don't need to take it to that level maybe, but as you said, I mean, you need to follow up. You need to, I mean, review and learn from it. Otherwise it doesn't make so much sense to put the effort in, actually. How do you think investors can apply this when meeting meeting companies and I mean, managers and so on during the research process? What lessons can they bring?
The biggest lesson they can bring is, there's two folds. One is capturing only the essence of what's being discussed. So as you get better and better at these note-taking tactics, you get to only capture the essence and crystallize. So what I mean by this is, a lot of people don't take notes, might do recording, and by recording, they shut their mind sort of down, and they don't focus on what's important. So I think by really taking that note to the next level, you are really squeezing out that cream of the crop, and the essence is what the management or these people can bring.
Because the question really comes from when you're in that meeting yourself and speaking with the person. I mean, the most important thing, in my view, is actually to listen and grasp everything they say to be able to ask the next question. Because it's a bit different if you listen to like some person speaking and you're not the one that needs to ask the question. How do you think about that? I mean, in terms of the listening aspect and really grasp everything, and at the same time taking these good notes?
That's a very difficult question. I think too many people focus on what they're going to say next, and they don't focus on listening first. And the actual answer is that if you listen intently to that person, you don't need to think about what you're going to say next. That note-taking aspect helps you grasp all that important information and let your mind free. So by note-taking, your mind becomes emptier. So it's freer to engage directly with your counterpart. And it will take some practice, and naturally, because you need to move on from a note-taking, listening, what am I going to say next mode, to completely being vulnerable and listening and not knowing what to say next. After you've managed to overcome that, you will start finding these very easy to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's both. I mean, it's both experience, but not only experience. You actually need to think about how to do this in the right way. And I think that answer really helps.
I'm also curious about about the part afterwards, and you mentioned this coloring system. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How you have set that up?
So initially I had just two notes, random note, whatever color, and a pink note. and the pink note was for the organized notes. And now I use the just you can get these colors, any color, blue, green, white, black, brown, any of these colors I have, and you just use these notes per different seasons, and then you just index them, and then you have a master note, whatever color you like, and you put that into your master note. Sort of like that. It's not categorically or thematically different because you don't want to do that right away.
Interesting. And we can't go through all of the 47 principles from your book. We recommend everyone to buy the book and read them, of course. But there's one principle that caught my attention, which was number 12, where you write about passion, and that in the beginning of your time at McKinsey, you really had to force yourself to get up early in the morning and be excited about work and get it done. But how did you overcome this over time?
You mean about the passion area?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult question. So in our world, or in the professional world, in consulting, or maybe banking, or the lawyerly work, I'm not talking for everyone, but it's hard to really get up in the morning and do the daily grind. And there I wanted to sort of have a light on the perception of passion. So broadening your horizon of what the definition of passion should be. And passion usually is not very clear to a lot of people. And by having into different layers, you're able to give yourself some pat on the back to push yourself forward and keep going. And so I emphasize that. And I think the mainstay passion for consulting would be something like problem solving, and that would be the biggest thing. And then next thing would be in different industries and client segments, so you try to develop an expertise, right? But actually beneath that, there are also other areas like people, the place, the organization, and the broad ecosystem contributions as well that you are dealing with. And I try to sort of compartmentalize that into different areas where you can find passion. Like I really like working with this particular team, even though I don't like working in the automotive sector. And that's okay. That could be part of your passion. Or it could be capability or skill set development, like chart writing, synthesizing, making issue trees, hypothesis trees. So I like all of that technical things. That's my passion. And therefore, so that was the aim. And by doing that, you're really able to push yourself more and more when life gets rougher and harder and harder. And as for me, that's what worked, and that was the key message in that principle. There's a hack for doing things when you are demotivated and you are lacking this passion. Is you just put your shoes outside the door, and you just throw it out there in the morning, and you must get out of the house. That really gets you going, especially if you have any interest in the levels of what you're doing at work. Not even at the macro or the big picture level, but even at the lower level. If you have anything you like, you know that once you get into the office, you're going to be okay.
Our health coach is giving the same advice. Just put on your training clothes and your running shoes and get out of the door. You don't have to do anything more. Just close your door and go outside, and then you can go back in if you want to. But usually you're so committed that you're still gonna continue. I guess it's the sunk cost fallacy playing there. But how is your passion now at Pinecone Assets?
So I think this is a great segue to the Pinecone. So Pinecone, at the big picture, I'm deeply engaged and passionate about both the social and the economic impact. And even at the daily grind, which is doing all the admin work and reaching out to these brokers day in, day out, and also cold calling, all of that inclusive, is spectacularly interesting for me right now.
And I mean, on that, please tell us why you started the firm from the beginning.
I think the short answer to this is that we saw the need, and we are able to feel that need at the right moment. I believe everything on business is about timing, and that's a very, very key element. Much of Pinecone's core vision should be credited to my partner Andrew, especially because he is the mastermind of everything and the business model. But I guess we both start with the question of how do we best invest and compound the modest amounts of capital that we have, the respective founders have, over a very long horizon of 20, 30 years. And we ask this question personally, but also because this is probably the big question that most everyone is asking somewhere inside their head as they go through their journey, the financial journey. And so then we sort of juxtapose that to a book or a theme called ikigai. In Japanese, it's called ikigai, but subsequently become very popular in English. And it's a very popular word, and it means there's a 4 elements that it's like a Venn diagram talking about what you love, what the world needs, or what the community needs, and what you can be paid for, and what you are good at. So all of these 4 things, and you're at the center point. And I think Pinecone addresses all of that at the micro level, which is us, but also at the next level, which is really important. And for me, it was a combination of this personal necessity and business opportunity and the right aspiration. And on this, I think Andrew is going to talk a little bit deeper into all of these. And so I want to just emphasize the right aspiration, and that is how we got connected with you guys in landing on the Swedish serial acquirers. But that model especially addresses the long-term perpetual holding and the decentralized model, and on all of this really clicked for us, and it was actually very novel. It was original for us, and that really sparked our interest.
So, Andrew, you are the co-founder of Pinecone Assets, and after this great introduction of why you wanted to do this, can you tell us a bit more so our listeners understand what Pinecone is doing and who are your role models in this endeavor?
Yeah, so look, we met in Stockholm, I think a month or 2 ago, and that wasn't by accident. So we actually came to Stockholm because we have been really studying the Swedish serial acquirers model, and you guys sitting in Stockholm must be very, very familiar already with the model. My understanding is that there's currently 80 to 100 Swedish serial acquirers out there. But this is actually a totally foreign concept to us, not just in Japan, but in Asia, right? And, we looked at this model and, we actually said, oh, wow, this is a really interesting model. And, and we looked at the cultural background and the sort of business norms in Sweden. And we compared that against Japan. And we go, oh, wow, there are also a lot of similarities, right, between how people do business, between the stakeholder sort of orientation, of to Japan and Sweden. Is much more, I'm obviously it's not exactly the same, but I think, it is much more. So Japan's business culture is much more closer to the Scandinavian one than an Anglo-Saxon one. And it's also really interesting to us because I mentioned so there's a lot of like an entire universe of very successful Swedish serial acquirers out there, and that's kind of important because it does show to us that look, if 1 or 2 people are doing it, then you go, hey, look, maybe there's a bit of hindsight bias, maybe there's a bit of survivorship bias. Maybe someone's just sort of retrofit a narrative around a success story, around some luck. But if you have a universe, a large universe of companies doing large, not doing exactly the same thing, but sort of underlying sort of what they do. And from what we discern, there are basically 3 things that are sort of non-negotiable in this model. Number 1, you're acquiring high quality small and medium enterprises that are cash flow generative. Number 2, you have a perpetual holding period, and number three, there's a decentralized operating model. So using this kind of formula, there are many companies in Sweden that are sort of successful. So that tells us that this model is repeatable, is replicable, and scalable, and that's very important to us. So conversely, we kind of then took this model out to the market here in Japan, and we spoke to founders, etc. And yeah, look, it was very, very well received, and in a number of cases, it actually gave us a competitive edge in a competitive auction process, because they like this model. So kind of short. So coming back to our role model, so I think we actually came to Stockholm a couple of months ago to meet with our role models, and that was tremendously fruitful for us, and everyone was very, very generous with their time and their knowledge, and that, as Shu would tell you, like gave us the confidence to really, really go ahead, and really go hard and in driving this model in Japan. So yeah, so that's sort of in a nutshell what we're doing.
I mean, one thing that's striking with this model, I think, is you have this this model where you get cash flows from the businesses you buy, and you can use that cash flow to buy more businesses. And I mean, one key aspect of this is that, because we often get this question, why is it I mean, from year to year possible to buy these businesses at such a large discount from the market? And I think the key in that is that these businesses that you buy, they don't have any avenue to use the cash flows for. So they would dividend out the money to the family typically. And now you have this model where you can use the cash flows to acquire more businesses. And one aspect of that is that, I mean, the really great serial acquirers in our view, they don't try to grow fast. I mean, they try to grow in a I mean, quite good pace. But I mean, in terms of the model that you spoke about, I mean, buying asset light businesses with good cash flows, that means that you could grow maybe 15, maybe 20% per year from your own cash flows. And we have seen now from the last years in the hype that we actually had in Sweden with companies coming in and to try to do this in a quick way, they failed, and now they're over levered and they're selling businesses and not acquiring businesses. So with that said, I mean, you have I mean, you're looking to have like a base capital base, and then you will start to buy companies out of that. How many companies do you own and plan to own, and how do you think about that? I mean, first buying these businesses to have that base, and then growing from your own cash flows versus, I mean, bringing in more money and so on. Talk about how you think about that.
Yeah. So look, I mean that's very interesting, and just want to sort of address one point there. I mean, you mentioned businesses that are generating a lot of cash flow, but then they don't have anywhere to deploy it. Well, yesterday we met a founder, and he's in his sort of late 60s, and basically he has a great business, a dominant business, distribution business in Tokyo. Um, and the company, and he told us, look, the company is generating a lot of cash. He has no way to deploy it, so he's gone and built an art museum. So yeah, so that's and that's the kind of opportunities that we're looking at here in Japan, honestly. And yeah, so then to answer your second question, so we like to think in terms of milestones. So right now we are in phase one. And so in this phase one, so we want to assemble a portfolio of small and medium enterprises. And we want to assemble such a portfolio that we can, we can achieve what we call escape velocity. And by escape velocity, I mean, look, that basically the company can basically generate continuous acquisition pathway, continue to deploy capital without having to raise additional capital from externally. And to us, we feel that's around 5 or 6 businesses that would provide us with a well diversified cash flow stream. At the same time, that would provide us with with enough cash flow to be able to grow by acquisition going forward. And then as for and once we reach that escape velocity, after that, the model basically is you then judiciously acquire a few more companies each year, and we will see how that goes.
Will be really interesting to follow. What type of sectors are you focusing in, or are you sector agnostic?
Yeah, so we're sector agnostic. Obviously, there are sectors that we like more than others. But look, we just want to keep an open mind at the end of the day because in the SME universe, and I have been in this universe for quite a while, um, you often just come across industries that you never even know existed before, right? And so that's sort of by definition a niche business because it's so niche. You go, oh wow, that's a business that's generating like 35% EBITDA margin, like existing in the middle of nowhere. And that's sort of why we want to keep an open mind regarding the sectors we're focused on. Now, having said that, I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't double down on a sector. We find it attractive and we already have assets in there, and basically there is there's obviously sort of meaningful benefits to continue to build up our sort of portfolio around that sector, and should there be more opportunities. And so in our pipeline at the moment, I can tell you sort of we have, we're looking at a VMS business, we're looking at an education business, we're looking at niche industrial businesses, we're looking at media distribution businesses. So stay tuned.
Great. And I want to ask you a question about, I mean, how you evaluate the quality of possible acquisitions. So here at Redeye, we as equity analysts, we have a rating system to determine that quality, and it consists of 3 main categories: people, business, and financials. And in the people side, I mean, of course, a lot of the focus is on capital allocation of the managers, and on the business, I would say one of the key aspects is the moat of the business. So talk about how you evaluate the quality of acquisitions.
Yeah, so look, I like how you guys keep it simple, and that's kind of the philosophy we go with as well. So if you look at our investment checklist, we have 10 items on our investment checklist. Um, it's not overly complicated. We look at business characteristics, things like whether the business has recurring revenue, whether it has low capital intensity, whether it's high margins. None of these will be new or controversial to you guys or to your listeners. And so, I mean, ultimately, I think it's not difficult to define what constitutes a quality company, but I think the, uh, the key there is to actually maintain your discipline and basically say, hey, look, we're going to stick by this list, and we're going to stick to quality. And look, as Mark Leonard says, hurdle rates are magnetic, and so once you lower your quality threshold, you tend to sort of your business goes the wrong way basically after that. So
And how big is the acquisition market in Japan for these type of businesses? And also, more detail, how many of them have the qualities that you're looking for approximately?
yeah, so people tend to, I guess, forget that Japan is still the third largest economy in the world. So that's the first point. And the second point is that we are at an inflection point in Japan, and this is where we saw sort of, wow, this is the right timing to build Pinecone. So what we're seeing today is basically the post-war baby boomer generation of company founders. So they are now in their 70s, and I think it's basically we are seeing an entire sort of generation of company founders who are forced into selling their businesses into third parties. Many of these businesses have not come onto the market for many decades. And just to give you a number, so METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Finance, basically have estimated that 60,000 profitable SMEs every year are going to require transition to third parties in the coming years. That's a very big number, and I think METI realizes that this is a major issue for the Japanese economy, because many of the company will have to shut down if they don't find a third party to transfer the company to. And so what's happening now is that there are all kinds of policy initiatives in Japan to aid the transfer of these profitable SMEs to third parties. And the other thing we're really seeing at the moment is that the business brokerage ecosystem here has really exploded in recent years. So the number of business brokers has doubled over the last couple of years, and part of that is due to sort of real demand, and part of that is also due to the fact that the government are throwing subsidies for people to start up business brokerages. So look, if you track the Tokyo Stock Exchange, there are a number of multi-billion-dollar listed business brokerages on the stock market now, and some of these are growing at 100% a year. So it's a phenomenal time at the moment, and we're seeing the fact that these business brokerages, being out there, they're really boosting the supply of sale-ready businesses out there. So look, the upshot is that this is a huge pond for us. And look, our job is basically from these 60,000 businesses that are, theoretically coming up for sale every year. We need to find the best couple of businesses at the right valuation. That is essentially our task.
And one key aspect of succession is of course that you take over the ownership. But for you, the large challenge is of course finding the right managers to operate those businesses. As you said, I mean, the owners are typically quite old and probably running the companies. And even though you won't replace them in the first year or so, maybe that you can talk about as well. How do you think about, I mean, really finding the right managers for the businesses in the long term?
Yeah, so look, that's I guess where where a lot of the work will have to be. And in the most ideal scenario, and we are coming, in a couple of the opportunities that we're looking at the moment, there is an anointed successor in the business. So a 2IC that's been with the business for 10, 20 years, but basically they just don't have the money to buy the business, and we come in with the capital, and we basically put together incentive plan, and that to us is the best case scenario, right? And I think that's because it's a fairly easy transition once you validate you have the right management. And look, there's also a second scenario where basically the owner is in his 60s or early 70s, and he's basically thinking about retiring now, and he's thinking ahead of time, and he's basically saying, look, I have another couple of years to go, and in which case we will basically say, okay, well, we will buy the business from you, and we will basically, you will promise to us you will work with us for at least 24 months, and we spend that time together to find a successor for you. And that's also a scenario we've come across. So look, there are many. It just depends on what the specific situation is, and part of what we need to do is basically just work with the owner, work with management, and and then people. And as you would know, is the most important thing in these small businesses.
And considering all the brokers coming up and also the businesses that are out for sale and coming up for sale, do you see many other serial acquirers coming up, either consolidating the market or being more of a niche players?
Yeah, look, we are the first one, actually. We are the first one that are taking this approach from grounds up. There are a few other players who are sort of more sector focused. And they have companies like Danaher, etc., as their model. And in terms of a sector agnostic serial acquirer, we are the only people that we've come across. So we will take advantage of this opportunity.
Sounds like you have a lot to do in Japan. I mean, Andrew, you are an Australian native, but is that on the table as well to keep an eye on other markets, or is it solely focused on Japan now for the next decade or so?
Look, I mean, the Japanese market will keep us busy for many decades, I would assume. But yeah, look, having said that, look, the North Asia generally is facing basically the same kind of aging demographic problem. Countries like Korea and Taiwan, they are maybe 10 years behind Japan, just because if you factor in when they industrialize, etc. So I suspect we would have an opportunity in the surrounding countries as well. But look, that's sort of not, that's a bigger sort of longer term kind of opportunity.
And we haven't talked about your name, Pinecone Assets. I mean, it's a beautiful tree, but maybe you can explain why you have chosen this name, and in connection with that, maybe say a bit more about the long-term ambition of the firm.
Yeah, so we thought Pinecone really sort of captures what we want to do. And basically it's about, Pinecone, it's an evergreen tree, right? So it's about evergreen, it's about long term, it's about sustainability. And the purpose of a pine cone is basically to protect the seeds, in just until the environment is right to basically, for them to germinate, to actually thrive. And sort of from that perspective, like, we see ourselves as the safe custodians of these and forever homes for these small and medium enterprises. And so so we just thought pine cones it just really encapsulates what we want to do, and our relationships with our portfolio companies.
And you mentioned this aspect before, but Shu, in the book, you have a whole section dedicated on how to improve the group, where you mentioned decentralization as a key principle. Can you talk about why decentralization is so powerful, and how your setup is at HQ at Pinecone, and how you think about working with the portfolio companies?
Yeah, so decentralization is powerful because, as you know, it's really what makes the decision making process faster, and you can execute and act faster while at growing at their own pace. And those three things are really important for decentralization. At Pinecone HQ, we take a long-term view for our target companies as well as ourselves. So our approach to us and our companies with the right set of governance is really key. And we want to create that in an organic way. And we want to let it unfold, just like our name, Pinecone, how it germinates, like Andrew mentioned. And we try to be flexible in our organization so that we could correct our mistakes. Hopefully, we don't make too many, but we correct our mistakes along the way and mold it so we have a Japan unique decentralization model. And I think regarding Japan and the decentralized model, I think we need to talk about decentralization and when it works, right? So from what we understand from our trip to Sweden and understanding about serial acquire model is that part of decentralization model requires the individual or the company to be very much responsible and accountable. And that links with entrepreneurial spirit. And for Japan, these late baby boomer generation are quite entrepreneurial. And so that kind of like checks off. And the next one is about the high trust or trustability, credibility that is required for decentralized model. And I think we have no problem there because the employees here are quite able and trustworthy. The only thing we need to be careful of is the setting the right expectations and clear KPI, but not so in a monitoring fashion, but more so in the guiding fashion, which is more likely for Japan. And third, which is the most important, would be the values that are in the process and output for Japan, and the craftsmanship, or what we call the monozukuri in Japan, is what delivers the superior products and quality. And we want to harness that and keep that intact for Japan. And it would become the asset and strength in the decentralized model, right? If you think about it, that allows them to keep it, not with the headquarters. Okay, so those three is what probably is necessary and what has to happen in Japan.
And to end this section about Pinecone and also connect it with your book, I'm curious if there are any other of the principles that you mentioned in the book that you find helpful in the work of building a serial acquirer.
Yeah, so I had to go back into my book and then make the necessary link with the serial acquirers, which has never been done before. And I actually came up with quite a few, and I'll be quick. I came up with half a dozen of them. And the first one and foremost is focus on what really matters, which was the first principle. This applies to serial acquirer model, obviously, because we only get a few shots at our deals and connecting with our owners and making a lasting impression. And then we go from there. So we really need to focus on what really matters. And part of focus on what really matters is talking about financials. And this is really about what serial acquirer is about, in especially in the free cash flow generation area. And also we can use this to have a razor sharp focus on our target companies and being there. The second one, I think, is always imagining the worst case scenario. When we do our due diligence, we always perform a pre-mortem analysis. This is like under the presumption that things will go wrong. So in the due diligence, we do this analysis, so we imagine the worst case scenario. So that principle would come in handy. The third one is the role model. And I think we talked extensively about role models today, so I don't need to go deeper in there, but that's especially important. And we will love to have this connection with Sweden as we go through our decade-long journeys. The fourth one is question more and talk less. I especially like this one because questioning more allows you to be directly flexible with your thoughts. And we tend to have a model in our head, and this is how it should be. This is how the governance structure ought to be. But that would be a recipe for failure. So by questioning more to our target companies and to our model itself, I think it'll allow us to stay on the edge. So, and then there's two others, which is pretty basic, but go out with interesting people every week, which I mentioned in the book. Especially important for serial acquirers to connect, be willing, making the calls. And then the last one, to gauge your people. That is also very important because people is your asset, both in the company and outside when you're target companies. And here I do mention those 5 elements that are important, but of which I think the most important is the will and attitude and keeping in mind for that.
Wonderful. And looking back at your time as a consultant and the McKinsey Edge book, are there some things you don't agree with anymore now that you're building the serial acquirers and looking back at what you wrote and how you worked at the time?
Something I don't agree. I love all my 40s. No. I think you're right. There are definitely times have changed. Things have changed, and I have changed. I think there's one overarching message that needs to change if I were to go back and revisit, and that would be it's too consulting centric. And so I'm not, this book is not able to broaden the horizon for other readers, and that is something I would really go dig deep and be applicable to other areas, right? Such as investing and other professions. And beneath that, there are two areas, the principles that struck out for me. One is on the passion, so the perception of passion. I believe that definition is too complicated, and I'd like to keep passion fresh. And for young people especially, it should just be your heart and what your heart tells you, and go after it, and don't complicate the matter. So that's something I would really try to adjust. The other would be the best intent in people. So that principle doesn't, when you're in a really cocoon environment like McKinsey, most people have that best intent in people, but as you go out in the real world, sometimes it's not true. And if you were trained by people with bad intentions, then you will become someone with bad intentions. And I think that's too naive for me to send that message across.
And maybe a more general question on that. I mean, working at McKinsey, I mean, you of course went into these large businesses and tried to improve them. And my thought is that you don't have any plans to use McKinsey consultants in your SMEs that you're buying. So how do you think about actually, I mean, things you learned working at McKinsey that you won't apply, that you think is wrong for the company that you work with now?
I think a lot of what McKinsey puts out on table is easy to digest for bigger organizations, and it's tailor-made for that. And why that is so is it is about problem solving at the highest level, at the CXO level of a large organization, where the people underneath who have the daily hurdles to solve these smaller problems are not in that room. So it's easier for McKinsey to come in and say, you have to do X, Y, Z, and then funnel that down, please. In a small, medium enterprise, you probably know where I'm going at, but that's not so. Everybody's sort of in the room, and you as a CEO have to do what the McKinsey might tell you to do, and you're like, oh no, and there'll be a big pushback, right? And it's very emotional sometimes because you have the legacy. So that is a very big difference in terms of thinking. That's not too applicable.
Yeah, because I think some failed serial acquirers have actually used that model in a way that actually hurts the businesses. So that was where I was coming from. Actually, it was a bit of a leading question. So, as this is a book podcast, we always wrap up with questions about reading and writing. And Andrew, you mentioned in the beginning how important books have been for you. And for our listeners who are keen learners and want to become better capital allocators, do you have a title you would like to recommend?
I think there's obviously the foundational sort of reading, which I think gives you the sort of baseline knowledge into capital allocation. So I think your readers will all know these titles: The Outsiders, Essays of Warren Buffett. These. I guess these books, provide great insights, I guess, from an observational perspective, right? So they take case studies and observe businesses, etc. But I think also sort of there's another angle in that. I think if I think everyone should actually also just read writings from the practitioner's perspective. And by that, I mean, there are a lot of great capital allocators out there. They publish annual letters, they publish annual reports, etc. And I think it's great to sort of just learn from these guys in real time who are there out there making capital allocation decisions. And you could follow people like Mark Leonard's, or you could also just dig deeper and just any of the Swedish serial acquirers, especially the very successful ones. I really recommend everyone follow what they do and the capital allocation decisions that they make. And you could also go a little bit sort of left field. Recently I've just started to get into the history of LVMH and Bernard Arnault. I mean, that's a great capital allocation story, right? And it's a little bit different, but it's also very applicable.
And Shu, in the McKinsey Edge, you describe yourself as a junkie of self-help books. It's really hard to recommend to someone else. It's quite personal, but is there one title that has influenced you a lot?
Yeah, so you're right. I love self-help books. It gives you, it's like a positive, jolt medicine. It makes you very happy if after you read it. There's like a lot, way too many, from like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits to Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, from Richard Carlson, or authors that are really bestsellers like Malcolm Gladwell, right, with David and Goliath, or Outliers, to I guess popular books by the investment gurus, which would be like Cialdini's book, The Influence. These are mainstream, but another one I think of recent would be Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money, which I actually, it's in the self-help category for me. Um, so I really like all of. But if I were to pick one book, I would say it's The Magic of Thinking Big, and it's by David Schwartz, and it's a combination of business and self-help book. And the key message is that you don't have to be fearful for anything, and you just paint yourself a big picture and just go at it. And I really like the message, but underneath that message, it gives you a lot of tactical day-to-day how to better yourself, and it's done in the most eloquent way possible and easy to digest way possible. And so it gives you a lot of, we're in the domain of self-help, so courage to just go after what you want to go after. I think partly, to tie it in with what we're doing here in Pinecone, is that it does talk about big picture, and it does talk about not selling yourself short for your visions and being a pioneer, and all of that message in that book, both from the individual perspective and organization perspective, really it strikes the chord.
I like the connection between self-help and self-understanding for investors. We also need to read those type of books and see it from that perspective. I mean, we have spoken about your good notes taking, and you come across as a very structured and thorough and dedicated person. So many of our listeners are curious and they want to learn how to improve their processes. So do you have one title that you can recommend in that area as well?
Very difficult question. I really didn't read a lot of the process-oriented or process improvement books, because McKinsey sort of taught you all that throughout their journey. So you were inundated with how to improve your processes, right? Product optimization. So I want to give you a sort of a flavor that I liked, which I read a decade ago, called Immunity to Change. And this book was written by Harvard professors. It's quite academic, but talks both at the individual level and at the organizational level. And the short message is human beings are lazy and they don't want to change. They're immune to change. And often in our day-to-day, we talk about additional things and how to improve, which is plus, right? But it's also important to know what are the things you have that you need to unlearn and debottleneck, that you carry a baggage now as you get older. And as we get older and older, I find that to be very important. And the core message of that in this book is something that will help improve your process. So to debottleneck your process, so to speak. That might be kind of what I can propose to your listeners.
Great advice. We'll put that in the show notes for all the listeners to find the books. And I also have to ask you, I mean, you wrote this book 2016, it was published. Do you have any ideas of writing another one on any topic?
Yeah, sort of. I've written a book in Japan on leadership feedback already, published about 2 years ago. It's done quite well. And my current focus is on hiring and development of individuals and going there. And maybe one day I'll be able to, me and Andrew, and we'll be able to write deeper about the serial acquirer and this entire model and this universe, and then ask you guys, and that would be a dream come true.
Looking forward to that. Shu Hattori and Andrew Chou, thank you so much for coming on Investing by the Books podcast. Is there something more you want to add before we finish up here?
So from my side, I would love to say that I really love what Redeye is doing in this ecosystem. I'm always bewildered by the depth and the astuteness of the analysis, how you can even get there. And it's very helpful that you are the bridge of everybody, right? Of all the participants. And then that, to me, is something I'd like to add.
Thank you so much. Andrew?
Yeah, look, I mean, I second that, and I think, you guys have done a great job connecting the community through books, and we both love your podcast. We both love, reading books. We both love business investing. So, yeah, so really, really, we're really glad to be on the podcast finally.
Hope to see you in March in Stockholm at the Serial Acquirers event then.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much.
And lastly, we have many fund managers, analysts, operators, and private investors listening here. Are there any job openings or investing opportunities available at Pinecone?
Yeah, so look, we are actually recruiting here at Pinecone. And so, anyone that's interested, you guys, they can find us at www.pinecone.co.jp. Also, you can sign up to our emailing list on our website just to keep track of what we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Investing by the Books, a podcast by Redeye. Follow us on Twitter at ib_Redeye and email us at ib.podcast@redeye.se. To improve, we'd love to hear your feedback, so please rate and review us. Notice that the content in this podcast is not and shall not be construed as investment advice. This information is meant to be informative and for general purposes only. For full disclaimer, visit redeye.se. I'm your host, Eddie Palmian, and until next time, I sincerely wish you the best of luck on your journey through life and investing.